Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. I'm continuing our thinking together about the meaning of love. And today I want to read a few verses from Moffatt's translation of the 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians. Love is very patient, very kind. Love knows no jealousy. Love makes no parade, gives itself no airs, is never rude, never selfish, never irritated, never resentful. Love is never glad when others go wrong. Love is gladdened by goodness, always slow to expose, always eager to believe the best, always hopeful, always patient. The working definition that we are using is this, that love is the experience of being dealt with at a point in oneself that is beyond all the good and beyond all the evil. To love is to deal with another person at a point in him that is beyond all the good and beyond all the evil. There is something in the experience which has with it always a note of security, of emotional security. And security in its simplest terms means the experience of having one's needs satisfied. And whoever is able to satisfy one's needs, simple needs or complex needs, the response, because of this sense of satisfaction, is in terms of not only dependence, but in terms of trust, in terms of confidence, in terms of affection, in terms of love. It is for this reason that religion insists that God loves man, and that it is man's experience of the love of God which in the first instance enables him to be able to love anyone. I wonder if you take for granted the fact that so many of your own basic needs are satisfied by life. And if you take this for granted, then your attitude towards life may not be one of responsibility, responsiveness, of reverence, of gratitude. It may be an attitude that is simply callous. You may decide, for instance, that you rate the fresh air that you breathe and the cool water that you drink and all of the other simple creature ways by which your needs are satisfied. But if you reflect upon your total experience of life in this regard, then your attitude towards life will be one of reverence, and towards the creator of life, one of trust and confidence. Now, with this background, let us deal more specifically with the question before us. Love means, in simple experiential terms, the ability to let one's life be filled with many simple deeds of gratuitous extras, gratuitous kindnesses as manifested towards people by whom you're surrounded. When I was a boy, I could hardly wait for Thanksgiving, because Thanksgiving meant that Christmas was in the offing. And from Thanksgiving until Christmas Eve midnight, I was a mortal boy. I would respond almost instinctively to my mother's needs, During that whole period, for instance, she did not ever see the bottom of the wood box because I kept it full of wood all the time. I had a sense of what was vital for her. I could anticipate her needs. All of this because I knew that Thanksgiving meant that Christmas was around the corner, and when Christmas came, then I would be rewarded for all of these simple, gratuitous extras by which I had filled my relationship with my mother. Now, this mood that I manifested during that time is an indication, it's a sampling of what happens all the time in your relationships with people for whom you have this kind of love and affection. You can sense their needs. You can anticipate their needs. And at the heart of this anticipation, at the heart of this awareness, there is a kind of clear-cut and definitive understanding, so that your response to the need is an intelligent response, as contrasted merely with the sentimental or emotional response. At the center of the dynamics of the feeling, there must be an understanding mind. If I were to put it in a rather caustic phrase, it would be something like this, that in love, the mind must be as hard as ice, the heart as warm as a kitchen stove. This is what I mean. Now, there's a second dimension here. There is the tendency to feel ownership towards the person that you love and to demand that you will be loved in kind and in quality as the proof that your love has been received. We want to be loved back. Now, this is perfectly normal, very natural, but it is my thought that the necessity to be loved back in exchange for or in return for loving is an extraneous and irrelevant necessity, if I may put it that way. Love does not, at its best, love does not demand that love be given back to one in return. This is illustrated in a rather melodramatic story written many years ago by Olive Schreiner. She calls it the story of Towser. Towser was a little dog. He sat with his tail in a puddle of mud. It wasn't raining except out of his eyes, for he was very sad. Presently, a fine-looking aristocratic mastiff who lived next door came out of his yard and passed Towser's house, and he saw Towser weeping, and he stopped. Towser was a little terrier. He said to Towser, "What's the trouble with you, little fellow? Do other dogs bite you?" "No, I manage to take care of myself pretty well." "Do you get enough to eat?" "Yes, I have bones, and occasionally there's meat on them." "Do you have a place to sleep?" "Yes, I have a box with some rags in it." "Well, what's the trouble with you?" And Towser said, I want to love people, and I want to feel that people love me." And the master said, "Love? What is that? Have you ever seen it?" "No," said Towser. "Have you ever smelled it?" "No," said Towser. "Have you ever tasted it?" "No, I haven't ever tasted it." "Well, what good is it anyway?" And thus applying the pragmatic test to that kind of reality, the mastiff went on down the street. Towser got up, shook the water off his tail and the water out of his eyes, and went in the opposite direction. Presently, he saw a ragged newsboy coming, a newsboy who had a very sad face. And he went running up to the newsboy, literally in a ball of excitement. He didn't know whether to lick the boy's hands first or his feet. He just wanted him so. And the boy called him, "Doggy, Doggy." And when Towser came very close to him, he kicked him in the nose. But the lonely boy laughed. There was a singing in Towser's ear now as he went down the other side of the street. He wasn't so sure about how he felt. He came to the outskirts of the village, and there he saw a cottage. The gate was open. He went through the gate, up the steps. At the door, he looked in. He saw an invalid stretched out on a bed. He made a noise at the door, which being interpreted was, "If you ask me, I'll come in." So the invalid asked him in. And Towser found that she was a very lonely person. She had had a dog once upon a time, but he'd gone away somewhere. Towser tried to amuse her during the daytime by catching his tail with his teeth so as to take her mind off her suffering. And then in the nighttime, when he would hear her cough, he would get up from his pad and walk over by her bed and rub his head against her hands and lick her fingers to let her know that even though it were nighttime, he knew that she was suffering and he cared. And then one day, the dog that belonged home came back. And Towser heard the invalid say, I don't want to give Towser away, but what shall I do with him? Well, Towser didn't want to be given away, so he went out of the backyard and disappeared. But as he went along, he had the feeling that the invalid, for the first time in her life, had had an experience with someone to whom her invalidism was not a burden. When Towser saw a boy just ahead of him, a boy with a large piece of meat under his arm, and a man jumped from behind a tree, accosted the boy, threw him to the ground, and was trying to take the meat from the boy, and Towser barked at him furiously, and presently the man got up and ran away because he thought somebody was coming. The boy looked at Towser, his face purple with rage, and he said, "Do you try to do that to me after all that your master has done to me?" So he attacked Towser. Well, Towser was thrown into the bushes. The last time I saw him, says the story, he was stretched out in the road. Now, what does this mean? That love at its best does not demand requitement. It gives, and in its giving, it finds its strength and its security and its ability to give more and more and more. This is our privilege, and this is our opportunity. Let the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer.